In the universe of Warhammer 40,000, where eternal war intertwines with the secrets of antiquity, there are figures whose greatness and tragedy have defined the fate of the entire galaxy. Demigods, created to unite humanity, became the embodiment of power, faith, and ambitions. However, their destinies were as grand as they were destructive. Today, we embark on a journey through the history of each Primarch, uncovering their fates, achievements, and downfalls. Who are they, heroes, traitors, or victims of their era? First on our list is the Lion, or Lionel Johnson, the Primarch of the First Legion known as the Dark Angels. The winds of chaos cast the capsule with the infant onto the death world of Caliban, a planet nearly entirely covered in jungles and swarming with creatures that were perverted by destructive forces. This world was located to the north of the Eye of Terror and fully felt the influence of the warp. Human colonies were stuck in the Middle Ages, and habitable territories were divided between groups of knights. Some achievements from the Dark Age of technology were preserved. Hence the knights used early prototypes of power armor to fight chaos spawn lurking in the forests. The capsule with the Primarch landed far from human settlements, forcing young Lion to survive on his own in his early years. The early years of the young Primarch remained unknown to the history of the Imperium, but eventually he was discovered by a knight of Caliban. He was found by a party of knights known as the Order. The Order differed from other knightly gatherings by recruiting from among the common folk based on merit and qualities, whereas others maintained rather closed communities. During one hunt for chaos creatures, a group of knights encountered a boy who had survived in the forest for a long time. They were about to attack him when one of them, Luther, stopped his companions, awed by the boy's ability to survive in such hazardous places. They brought him to civilization and named him Lionel Johnson, meaning lion, son of the forest. His name also alluded to one of the most bloodthirsty and dangerous beasts, the Calibanite lion. To the knights' surprise, the boy quickly mastered their language, culture, and immediately adopted their way of life. Luther became a mentor and teacher to the young Primarch, and they soon became close friends. Lion was silent but, like all Primarchs, a genius, while Luther was charismatic, experienced, and respected within the Order. Thus, mentor and student soon reached high positions in their community. The Order continued to expand, prompting Lion and Luther, having persuaded the masters of other knightly communities, to embark on a crusade to protect Caliban from the forest monsters, a mission they completed successfully. A golden age dawned on Caliban, with all cities united under the Order's rule, and Lion was elected as the Grand Master, sowing the seed of envy in Luther's heart. Around the same time, the Great Crusade of the Emperor arrived at Caliban. Seeing that the planet near the Eye of Terror was thriving, the Emperor desired to pay a personal visit to the inhabitants of this world. Thus unfolded the first meeting between the lost Primarch and his creator, which was more akin to a reunion between a father and his beloved son. The Lion took command of the 1st Space Marine Legion, which was named the Dark Angels. Caliban became the home planet for the Legion, and the Order wholly stepped into the ranks of the Space Marines. Those who were young enough underwent full transformation into Astartes, but the majority of knights could only undergo partial transformation. They were not as strong and resilient as the other members of the Legion, yet they still held respected positions among their brothers. The first to undergo partial transformation was Luther, who became the chief aide and advisor to the Lion. However, after the initial campaigns in the Great Crusade, the Lion recalled Luther back to Caliban as regent and mentor for the next generation of Space Marines. Although Luther's position was indeed important and revered, the seeds of resentment and envy grew even stronger, later leading to events that were tragic for the entire Legion. We will deliberately skip the story of the Primarch of the 2nd Legion, as it is much more intriguing, but we shall definitely return to it later. For now, you shall learn about the Primarch of the 3rd Legion, known as the Emperor's Children. The pod containing the infant crashed onto the forgotten mining world of Chemos, where hard labor and poverty were the norm, and dwindling hope was the destiny of its inhabitants. One day, The guards of the fortress factory of Kallax spotted a bright flash of a falling meteorite in the sky. Despite the fortress being sparsely populated, the ruler still dispatched a group of scouts to the crash site. What this group found there would later enter the legends of Chemos. Right in the center of the crater lay a crying infant, and beneath him emerged a spring of crystal-clear water, which on this dying world was valued more than any treasure. The scouts considered this a sign from above and decided to take the infant with them. Although every additional mouth to feed on Chemos was a burden, one of the scouts persuaded the ruler to allow him to adopt the child. He was given the name Fulgrim, which, according to local law, meant one who brings water. Fulgrim grew rapidly, and where his minor peers worked standard shifts, the Primarch could labor for days without rest. He had an excellent understanding of the machinery he worked with, and later began to improve upon it. By the time of his 15th birthday, he had been promoted to chief engineer, and upon learning that the planet and its population were slowly dying, he vowed to save his world at any cost. He sent colonists to establish settlements in previously uninhabited territories, reopened abandoned mines, and set up a recycling system. When Kallax began producing more than it consumed, other fortress factories began to join it. Meanwhile, Fulgrim brought back art and an appreciation for the beautiful to this world, while himself acquiring an incredible drive towards perfection. 50 years after landing, Fulgrim became the ruler of all Chemos, granting the people not only the chance to survive, but the opportunity to thrive. Chemos literally rose from the ashes, earning Fulgrim the moniker of the Phoenician, or simply the Phoenix. A few years later, the Emperor arrived on Chemos with his Space Marine army. Upon seeing him, Fulgrim was struck by the perfection of this being, perfection which he himself had strived for all these years. And then he immediately knelt before him and offered his sword. The Emperor warmly welcomed his lost son and spoke of the Great Crusade, of Terra, and of the Space Marine legions. The Primarch immediately expressed the desire to meet his own legion. But upon arriving on Terra, he saw before him only a few hundred Astartes. The Third Legion, which would soon be named the Emperor's Children, had suffered a series of dire setbacks. In the early battles of the Crusade, it took heavy losses. The gene seed of the Legion sent to Luna mysteriously vanished, and the reserve stored on Terra was completely destroyed by an unknown virus. The Legion could only be replenished by extracting the gene seed from fallen comrades. However, this technology was flawed at the time, and thus, with each battle, the Third Legion slowly died. Consequently, when meeting his Primarch, only the pitiful remnants of what once was a colossal army turned their gaze to Fulgrim. Virtually every warrior bore the banner of his fully or nearly fully perished company, yet they stood with pride and honor. What he saw deeply affected and moved Fulgrim. He knelt before his legion and vowed that just as his planet Chemos had risen from the ashes, so too would the legion rise once more. You are the Emperor's chosen, his warriors, his children, and this is but the beginning. The Primarch's speech pleased the Emperor, so he allowed the legion to wear the platinum aquila, the Emperor's own emblem, on their armor. He also decreed their armor to be painted purple and named them the Emperor's Children. Thanks to finding the Primarch, the necessary gene seed was quickly synthesized, and recruits from the Legion's new homeworld, Chemos, allowed for swift replenishment of losses. Many noble houses of Terra also gave their firstborns as part of old oaths. Even during the Age of Strife, at the time of the Thunder Warriors' purging, noble families of Europe had given their sons to this very legion, thus forming a brotherhood of warriors with ancestral lines long lost in the history of ancient Terra. Additionally, Fulgrim's legion was for a time attached to joint operations with the Lunar Wolves and Horus. Strong bonds formed between the two brothers, and when the Emperor's children set off on their own endeavors, Fulgrim pledged his loyalty to Horus, a vow that would later play its part. Next follows the story of the Fourth Legion's Primarch Perturabo. A pod with an infant fell on the planet of Olympia, which was located on the opposite side of the galaxy from Terra. This world was almost entirely composed of mountain ranges rich in minerals, yet hindering the growth of cities within the local society. The colonists here were not significantly affected by the age of strife and managed to preserve technology, although they had nonetheless regressed to a pre-atomic industry. The entire planet was covered with small cities, each of which was autonomous, and their rulers fought among themselves for resources and territories. Each of the cities had massive fortified walls and strong defences against sieges. The stronger the defence, the easier it was to endure skirmishes with rivals, which meant more opportunities for prosperity and enrichment. The rulers of the 20 most powerful cities were called the Titans of Olympia, and once the boy, who had already gained fame as a skilled artisan and formidable mercenary among the populations of other cities, was brought to the court of the ruler of the fortress city of Lokos. Damikos put the boy through a test, where he checked his strength in training battles with the best guardsmen and his intellect, by posing him the most complex riddles that the court scientist could devise. The boy passed all the tests perfectly, and so the ruler took him into the palace, providing protection and shelter, but also taking a vow of loyalty. The boy grew incredibly intelligent, gravitating towards scientific and technical knowledge. He made numerous groundbreaking discoveries, but was cold and taciturn in communication. Upon reaching adulthood, the boy refused to choose a name from the dynasty of the family that sheltered him, which would have shown them respect. He chose his name from a very old scroll that no scholar before him had been able to translate. The youth named himself Perturabo. In adulthood, Perturabo became increasingly fascinated with military affairs. He improved siege weapons and also invented new ones. His technical savvy and the genius mind of a tactician helped Perturabo achieve great heights in open wars with competing cities. For his merits, he was given the moniker Hammer of Olympia, as no wall could withstand the onslaught of his soldiers and siege machines. Lokos became the mightiest state on the planet. Other cities were either absorbed by it or, in fear, submitted to its will. Perturabo gained a reputation as an incredibly ruthless warlord, sparing no one in his path. But he remained loyal to his oath and, despite clear superiority in everything, did not attempt to overthrow his ruler. Perhaps after the death of Damikos, Perturabo would have eventually taken his throne, but we will never know, for the ships of the Imperium appeared over Olympia. By that time, the inquisitive mind of the Primarch had likely already guessed that he was an artificially created life form, and that one day he would meet his creator. And so it happened. The meeting with the Emperor was very restrained. Perturabo was quickly brought into the essence of what was happening and took command of his legion called the Iron Warriors. The name of this legion was chosen with intent, originating back in the Age of Strife, and later during the era of conquest of the solar system. The legion earned a reputation as stubborn, resilient, and proud warriors. They executed their assigned tasks brilliantly, and thanks to a remarkable peculiarity of their gene seed, the legion expanded rapidly. The set of implants required to create a space marine were extraordinarily easy to assimilate in the body of a recruit, and were almost never rejected by the organism. However, the legion's renown played a cruel trick on them, leading them to be deployed to the most difficult and protracted battles. The Astartes, of course, served valiantly and patiently, but whereas other legions earned military glory quickly, the Iron Warriors spent many years on essential yet inglorious prolonged sieges of various sectors of space. The Legion simply became a tool in the hands of the Imperium, a workhorse of the relentless military machine, and when Perturabo finally met his sons, he could not overlook this. He ordered an examination of the Legion's entire service record and its combat doctrines. Upon receiving the necessary information, he concluded that the entire Legion was at fault for its ignominy. The punishment was decimation, the execution of every 10th Space Marine by lot. This caused extreme displeasure among the Emperor's close circle and other Primarchs. However, Perturabo was unyielding. Such punishment strengthened discipline and defined the character of the entire Legion. It was no coincidence that the Legion's motto was "Iron within, iron without." Perturabo did not desire for his Legion to be the best. He was displeased that his sons had not forged their own glory and the opportunity to be the best. Such cold cruelty would later assist Horus in swaying Perturabo to his side during the greatest betrayal. The next hero we will speak of is the Primarch of the 5th Legion, known as the White Scars, who was found on a planet called Mundus Planus, but it is more widely known by its local name, Chogoris. This world was covered with fertile steppes, lush vegetation and oceans, and its technological development had stalled at the discovery of gunpowder. A large part of the planet had been conquered by the local ruler known as the Palatine, who commanded a vast army of heavily armoured soldiers. However, the Primarch's pod landed in a region called the Empty Lands. These were steppes inhabited by nomadic tribes vying for control over pastures. The armies of the Palatine saw no necessity in these lands, thus the nomads lived in absolute freedom. One day the Primarch was found by the chieftain of one of the tribes called Talaskar. He adopted the infant and gave him the name Jagatai. The chieftain believed the boy to be a gift from the gods, and the fire in the child's eyes foretold the fate of a great warrior. The boy grew up, learning the culture of his people, but at one moment their tribe came under attack from enemies, the tribe known as Kurayed. In that battle, many of Jagatai's kinsmen perished, including his father. The young Primarch swore vengeance, and, becoming the greatest warrior of the Talaskar, led them on a campaign against the village of Kurayed, slaughtering every man, woman and child in the settlement. He severed the chieftain's head and hung it above his tent. After this massacre, known as the Blood Feast, Jagatai became the Khan of his tribe. This event shaped his identity as a man of honor, albeit a profoundly ruthless one. He led his tribe into war with other nomads, assimilating an ever-growing number of peoples. Soon his army numbered as many as the stars in the sky, and he led his forces against the Palatine Empire. The heavy infantry could not withstand the swift light infantry of Jagatai's archers, who encircled the unwieldy warriors and rained arrows upon them. Eventually, the armies of the Primarch stormed the imperial palace, and Jagatai became the rightful ruler of all of Chogoris, taking the title of Great Khan. However, Jagatai was not prepared to become a ruler, for all he knew was how to wage war and lead warriors. But half a year after conquering the capital, warriors descended from the heavens in exotic armor, and alongside them walked the emperor. Upon seeing him, Jagatai knelt and swore allegiance, for he believed that the being before him was capable of uniting all the stars in the sky. This was the ideal the Primarch had always aspired to. He passed the title of Great Khan to his closest general and took command of his legion, all of whose members bore a ritual scar from forehead to chin. This mark was characteristic of the Talaskar tribe. Jagatai Khan integrated the nomadic tactics into the warfare of the Legion, making the 5th Legion renowned for its speed in attack. The warriors placed great emphasis on the swift assaults of Space Marine detachments on bikes and speeders. Among other Primarchs, the taciturn and reserved Jagatai maintained friendships only with Magnus the Red and Horus. With the former due to his similar aloofness, and with the latter due to Horus's support and shared love for rapid attacks, the White Scars often fought side by side with the Lunar Wolves and even developed joint tactics. Next on our path is the Primarch of the 6th Legion, the wolf that leads his pack through the icy void. Leman Russ, the Primarch of the 6th Legion, landed on the death world of Fenris. The planet, covered in snow and ice and massive active volcanoes, was inhabited by the most horrifying monsters imaginable. In the icy oceans dwelt giant krakens, and in the mountains and sparse forests hunted the famous giant Fenrisian wolves. Fenris contained all the conditions for humans to be unable to survive on it. Nevertheless, the planet was populated by numerous human tribes. They were divided into small communities, warring with one another, and their development had halted at a primitive stage. Forging weapons and tools from metal represented the pinnacle of their technologies. Thus, the capsule containing the Primarch landed on one of the most inhospitable and dangerous worlds in the entire galaxy. The site of the capsule's impact lay far from human villages. However, fortune favored the Primarch, as he was discovered by a female wolf. She nourished and raised him alongside her two other cubs, who would later become loyal companions to Leman Russ, their names being Freki and Jerry. In his youth, Leman Russ was found by hunters from a nearby village and later adopted by its king. Like his Primarch brothers, he was immediately integrated into human culture and life, achieving remarkable heights in many fields. After the king's death, none doubted that Leman Russ would assume his place. He conquered neighboring tribes and multiplied his power and glory with each passing month. The Primarch revelled in bloody battles and boisterous feasts afterward, and his successes swelled his pride. So when the Emperor came, Leman Russ refused to swear fealty willingly. Instead, he proposed 3 challenges to the Emperor. In the first 2, involving food and drink, Leman Russ emerged victorious, but in the third challenge, a duel, the Emperor bested his son, and the Wolf King was compelled to kneel. Fenris became the new homeworld for the 6th Legion. The tribesmen of Leman Russ were eager to join the Celestial Army, as they called the Astartes, and the Primarch himself took command of his children. Their introduction was seamless, as the Legion was already known for its barbaric behavior before meeting the Primarch. Even during the Unification Wars, this Legion, along with 2 others who would be mentioned later, was created separately from the main forces. But only the Emperor and his close confidants knew the purpose of such secrecy. Perhaps it was connected to the fact that their gene seed, which would be named the Canis Helix, was interwoven with the DNA of Terran wolves. Magnus the Red mentioned that the first experiments with the Canis Helix were used on the initial colonists sent to Fenris. In the local conditions, they could mutate into Fenrisian wolves, who exhibited extraordinary intelligence, at least among all known animals to the Imperium. This gene seed induced the growth of coarse fur across the body, as well as the growth of fangs, enhanced hearing, vision and smell, and during battle it awakened a bestial fury. The Legion of Astartes grew very slowly due to high mortality from poorly integrating implants, and the recruits were the most feral barbarians from war-torn Terra. During the Great Crusade, the Space Wolves earned a reputation as savage and brutal barbarians who achieved victory in the name of the Imperium, bathing attacked worlds in blood. And with the arrival of the Primarch, the situation did not change. Due to their savagery, the other legions and Primarchs spoke poorly of the 6th Legion, referring to them behind their backs as the Pack, and their Primarch as the Emperor's chain dog. Leman Russ became the Emperor's personal executioner, performing the dirtiest tasks assigned to him, and this would play a cruel trick on him during Horus's betrayal. Thereafter, from the icy lands, the path leads to the stone bastions. The Primarch of the 7th Legion, the unyielding protector of the Imperium, Rogel Dawn, head of the Imperial Fists Legion. He was raised on the planet Inwit. One part of this world was shrouded in the eternal darkness of night, while the other was faintly warmed by the red rays of a dying star. The surface was veiled in ice, remnants of ruins from the first colonists of the Dark Age of technology slowly crumbling, and virtually all fauna could effortlessly claim a human life. The planet's population was trapped in a barbaric clan structure, where people possessed a very cold demeanor and enormous willpower, enabling them to overcome all the adversities of their world. It was into such a community that the Primarch arrived. He was taken in and adopted by the leader of a clan called House of Dawn. Rogel fondly remembered his foster parent and even preserved his fur cloak. After the foster parent's death, Rogel Dawn seized control over the entire planet, subsequently venturing into space, conquering several neighboring planets. It was during this period that he was discovered by the Emperor's Great Crusade. Occasionally, a legion, upon meeting their Primarch, might alter some customs or tactics. However, in this scenario, the general comportment of the Legion was only further solidified. The 7th Legion distinguished itself with sturdy warriors, who spoke slowly but thought swiftly. They excelled in assault, yet demonstrated even greater prowess in defense and position-holding. During the Unification Wars, when the Emperor received reports about the combat actions of the 7th Legion, he heard a phrase about the conquered territories that greatly pleased him. The Emperor's hand lowered and clenched into an unbreakable fist. By the next decree, the Emperor ordered the Legion to be named the Imperial Fists, and allowed them to wear the laurels of victory as part of their heraldry. The meeting between the Astartes and the Primarch proceeded calmly and silently in the spirit of such a dour legion. Moreover, the legion received substantial reinforcements from Inuit, and soon a large portion of the imperial fists consisted mainly of recruits from this world. However, the part of the Astartes recruited from Terra retained the tradition of ritual duels among brothers, and soon this tradition spread throughout the legion. The duel of honor was conducted with swords and served as an excellent means of uniting brothers. Among other legions, they had no equals in defense, which even led to grievances and disputes with Perturabo, following Dawn's careless words. He claimed that even the renowned siege masters, the Iron Warriors, would not break his defensive bastions. Ultimately, this resulted in open confrontation during the heresy. A majority of the brothers respected Rogel Dawn as a brilliant strategist, even more brilliant than Guilliman, the Primarch of the Ultramarines. Brilliance in battle planning and the Legion's specialization in defense would play one of the most significant roles in the history of the heresy, for it was precisely the bastions built according to Dawn's schemes that would withstand the traitor's onslaught on Terra. Behind the greatness of light always lurks darkness. Its name, a synonym for fear, its methods, an embodiment of terror. The Night Haunter left only darkness in his wake. Here you will discover the history of the Primarch of the 8th Legion. Konrad Kurz, the Primarch of the Legion known as the Night Lords, landed on the dark and inhospitable planet of Nostramo. This world possessed the richest deposits of adamantium and was covered with a vast number of mines and factories. As a result, the sky above Nostramo was perpetually shrouded in smoke, and it seemed as though the sun never rose over this world at all. The entire life of the impoverished was solely tied to the grueling mining work, and the wealthy treated the poor as slaves. Many people, in despair, ended their lives by suicide, yet many more perished on the dark streets. Some fell to various diseases due to such harsh living conditions, while others met their end by a neighbor's blade. The police investigated murders reluctantly, making Nostramo justifiably regarded as a perfect haven for thieves, murderers, and maniacs. However, of all possible outcomes that could have occurred with the Primarch on that planet, the worst happened, and he was not found. He had to survive on his own, hunt rats, and initially avoid encounters with street gangs. The boy witnessed all the nightmares that occurred on this perpetually night-shrouded planet. In situations where he realized that something was profoundly wrong, he initiated his own investigation. Konrad tracked all those involved in the matter and killed them mercilessly. He spared no one, not corrupt officials, not the most notorious bandits and murderers, nor the ordinary people who might have crossed the line of the law. People constantly found the dismembered bodies of those unfortunate enough to encounter the young Primarch. They gave him the nickname Night Haunter, and he became a symbol of hope for liberation from the oppression of lawlessness. Within a year, crime fell almost to zero, yet people who hoped so much for the actions of the Night Haunter feared him equally. At one point, Konrad Kurz appeared before the aristocrats and declared that they all would henceforth serve him. The dissenters quickly parted with their lives, and the rest crowned Kurz as the ruler of the entire planet. And here let us pause to examine the appearance of the Primarch. He possessed pale, almost white skin and long black hair. His distinguishing feature was his ability to predict the future. However, he could only see the worst possible outcomes of events, and thus Konrad Kurz's mind was perpetually haunted by nightmarish visions which could not but reflect on him. Nevertheless, let us continue the story. Shortly after Konrad Kurz seized power, the fleet of the Emperor and several Primarchs arrived on Nostramo. The meeting of Konrad Kurz with his father and brothers was reserved. Konrad knew who he was and why he was needed thanks to his visions. Gazing upon each of the Primarchs standing alongside the Emperor, Konrad saw the terrible futures of each of them. Some would die in fratricidal war, while others would commit the most heinous betrayal and dissolve in the embrace of ruinous forces. These visions shocked the Primarch, yet he chose not to share his gift and his visions with his father and brothers. Kurz assumed command of the 8th Legion, which was well suited to its Primarch. In ancient Terra there existed prison slums. The people living there never saw the light of day and were forever confined to such cities where lawlessness reigned. Only the cleverest, most agile and strongest survived. And it was within this environment that children were born. From birth, never seeing light, sun, freedom or safety, they had to quickly adapt to survive. Even the most fearsome thugs shunned them, for if these children managed to live to at least 10 years old, it meant they were more dangerous than any slum dweller. They were colloquially known as children of the night. They were pale and their eyes were highly sensitive to light. It was from these children that the Emperor created the 8th Legion. The gene seed took to the bodies of these children with remarkable ease, granting them even paler skin and the ability to see in the dark, even more potent than other Space Marine legions. However, they could no longer look at bright light without eye protection. This legion was often used to suppress rebellions and eliminate the Emperor's opponents on ancient Terra. With Konrad Curze's reunion with his legion, little changed in its complexion. The language of Nostromo became the primary language for the legionaries, the planet itself became a homeworld, and recruits were drawn from it. And these legionaries became known for their fatalism and dark sense of humour. The legion's specialization changed little. They were often dispatched to suppress uprisings on already conquered planets of the Imperium and to capture new ones. Terror became their primary combat tactic. The Night Lords employed any methods to intimidate their opponents. Often, a single brutal attack that annihilated all inhabitants in a landing zone was sufficient for the rest of the planet to surrender. The 8th Legion gained such a reputation that some rebellious planets would immediately surrender if threatened with the arrival of the Night Lord Space Marines during negotiations. Such methods of warfare were condemned by many other Primarchs, and thus Konrad Curze had few friends among them. He did maintain a certain regard for Fulgrim, who mentored him after Nostromo, but Konrad Curze did not seek their attention, understanding through his visions that they were merely instruments of the Emperor. Yet soon his horrific visions of future events became increasingly frequent. It is likely these visions nudged the Primarch toward choosing a side in the forthcoming conflict. However, he did not choose the Emperor's side. The next figure you will learn about today is the divine angel whose sacrifice saved the Imperium. Of course, we speak of Sanguinius. During navigation in the warp, his capsule encountered a fraction of energy from the Immaterium, resulting in Sanguinius developing a mutation in the form of feathered wings, like an angel. He landed on the planet Baal Secundus, a moon of the planet Baal. Baal Secundus was completely covered by radioactive deserts, and the human tribes possessed neither culture nor literacy. These were wandering small groups simply striving to survive. One such group, known as the Blood, discovered a capsule with a Primarch in a crater, later named the Angel's Fall. Initially, the people thought it was a mutant, of which there were many on the planet. However, the remarkable awareness in the infant's eyes and the divine sign of angelic wings convinced them that the child was a message from above requiring their utmost protection until he grew. Sanguinius grew, like all his brother Primarchs, literally by the hour. After 3 days he learned to walk, and in just a year he was taller than any man in the wastelands. His wings also grew large and strong, allowing the Primarch to fly. He was extraordinarily intelligent and handsome, and the people followed him with devotion. Sanguinius united the tribes that had not yet mutated from radiation and led them to war against the hordes of mutants. Though the mutated offspring numbered more, thanks to the talented command of Sanguinius, the purebred humans achieved victory. Sanguinius became the ruler of the entire desert of Baal Secundus. It is also worth noting that Sanguinius possessed a similar gift to Konrad Curze, seeing visions of the future, only they were clearer, more understandable, and not always with the worst outcome. Thus, Sanguinius foretold the Emperor's arrival on Baal long before it happened. Upon seeing his father, the Primarch fell to his knees and wept with joy. The Emperor saw that even under such harsh conditions, Sanguinius was able to unite the wild tribes that had once led a miserable existence, but now were pure in thought and looked at the Emperor with the pride and determination of their leader. The Emperor entrusted Sanguinius with command over the 9th Legion and named it the Blood Angels. The great angel took with him his most loyal followers, transforming them into space marines. The remaining people began to nurture the next generation, telling them stories of the angel's coming, of the father and son meeting, and about the imperial customs, laws, and tenets. They also devised trials for young men wishing to join the warriors of the 9th Legion. These trials occurred once every 100 years, and only a few managed to endure them and survive. However, in this manner the Legion received only the strongest and most worthy warriors into its ranks. The Legion warmly welcomed its Primarch, as Sanguinius embodied true valor and purity, which the Blood Angel Space Marines always aspired to. In battle, the 9th Legion heavily relied on its assault units, especially the detachment of Space Marines with jump packs. Descending from heights like a heavenly host, the Blood Angels struck terror into any foe. Unfortunately, subsequent events would severely affect the 9th Legion and their Primarch. The next Primarch, the Iron Warrior, whose will and pursuit of perfection became his strength, but also doomed him to tragedy. The Primarch of the 10th Legion, Ferrus Manus, landed on the planet Medusa. This was a dark and cold planet, 4 times larger than Terra and extraordinarily rich in resources. During the Dark Age of technology, Medusa was a major supplier of resources, and even after the Age of Strife, Terra and Mars remembered such a wealthy planet. However, it no longer represented the rich and technological world of the old records of the Imperium archives. The wealth had been looted, and high tectonic activity forced the mines to be abandoned. The people regressed into tribal societies, and only ruins remained of the ancient cities. Initially, the Primarch was not found by people. Thanks to the rapid growth rate of Primarchs, Manus quickly developed. He realized that his capsule, engraved with the Roman numeral 10, was clearly of artificial origin, meaning that Manus had come from another world. Shortly after his landing, the young Primarch encountered a biomechanical creature resembling a worm, whose body was covered with organic metal. The creature initially attacked the Primarch, but then fled, and Ferrus Manus vowed to track it down and kill it no matter the cost. As he traveled, the Primarch met nomadic tribes of humans, but he did not join them, strictly pursuing his goal, and eventually Manus tracked down the strange creature. To defeat it, the Primarch had to throw it into a volcano's lava. The steel scales of the beast melted and fused with the Primarch's hands, granting them the strength of steel. Subsequently, this distinguishing feature of the Primarch would give the name to the 10th Legion. After defeating the monster, Ferrus Manus finally returned to the human tribes of Medusa. The Primarch proved to be a talented craftsman and inventor, teaching people technologies but not intervening in the wars between tribes. He believed that, in battles, a strong generation of humans could be forged. The Primarch's character was cold and calm, yet within him burned a rage. Ferrus Manus's main passion and greatest talent was blacksmithing. It is said he felt at peace only when standing at the anvil, creating weapons that even the tech priests of Mars could not replicate. Be akin to a cooled blade, just tempered, cold and hard on the outside, but red from the smith's heat, invisibly burning within. Thus, the Primarch taught the people of Medusa, and later his legion. Sometime after Ferrus Manus's victory over the monster, the Emperor arrived on Medusa and finally met his son. But Ferrus Manus refused to simply accept the Emperor's offer to join him among the stars, and challenged him to a duel to test his strength and assess the power of the one who claimed to be his father. According to legend, during that duel, even mountain ranges were ground to dust, unable to withstand the might of such legendary beings. Eventually, Ferrus accepted the Emperor and took leadership of the 10th Legion. Ferrus Manus chose Medusa as the homeworld of the Legion and roughly merged the culture of his world's tribes with the culture brought by the Space Marines from Terra. Major divisions of the Legion, Ferrus Manus named clans. The Space Marines came to live among the ordinary tribes and rule over them, punishing and executing any dissenters immediately. Due to the sparse population on Medusa, Ferrus mandated that the peoples conquered by his legion from other worlds pay tribute in the form of young men who were then sent to Medusa and groomed into worthy candidates. The novices were trained in the traditions of life on Medusa, and drilled under the watchful eyes of the Space Marines. They were to become as relentless warriors as the Astartes, for the favoured tactic of the Iron Hands was the stubborn, gradual advance, driving back enemy forces with a barrage of fire. Ferrus was a harsh ruler and commander, with failure being unacceptable for his legion. The Legion of the Iron Hands, so named for their Primarchs' unusual arms, sincerely believed that failure was a weakness, and weakness was the greatest sin in the eyes of their leader. The Astartes sought to eradicate any weakness from their bodies, ultimately concluding that flesh itself was imperfect. Emulating the metallic hands of their Primarch, the Space Marines often replaced their limbs with metal prostheses, enhancing their bodies. The Iron Hands cherished their Primarch as a stern father, whose rare praise was worth its weight in gold. Despite his coldness and severity, Ferrus Manus forged a strong friendship with Fulgrim, Primarch of the Emperor's children. However, during the heresy, the brothers found themselves on opposite sides of the barricade. As with the Second Legion, we deliberately skip the history of the Primarch of the 11th Legion, but will certainly return to it later. Meanwhile, we proceed to the next, a warrior born in chains who became the embodiment of rage and destruction. His legion, like his heart, burned with an insatiable lust for battle. The Primarch of the 12th Legion fell to the small planet Nuceria, which was ruled by slave owners from the city of Deshea. The capsule containing the Primarch landed in the mountains, where he was discovered by a slavers' detachment. It is said that when he found the severely wounded child near the capsule, eviscerated bodies of Xenos lay around him. Rumor has it that they were Eldar, whose seers had seen the future of this Primarch and wished to eliminate him. The slaver captured the Primarch and took him to his city, where gladiatorial combat was the main form of entertainment. Having recovered from his wounds, the Primarch was forced time and again to enter the sands of the arena, fighting to the death. But like all his brothers, Angron, as he was named, was a very strong and skillful warrior. In time he became the absolute champion of the arena and earned the nickname Lord of the Red Sands. However, in Angron's heart, there burned a rage and grudge against his masters. Several times he organized gladiatorial uprisings, but only the largest one was more or less successful. Angron's small army, named the Eaters of Cities, managed to break out beyond the city's territory and disappear. The rulers of Deshea repeatedly sent armies against them, but to no avail. However, the last attack of the slave owners could have been the final one for Angron's army, and in the midst of the siege of the fortress occupied by the gladiators, the Emperor appeared to Angron, offering him to come with him and take command of the warriors created in the Primarch image. After consideration, Angron refused, choosing death among his battle comrades. However, this did not satisfy the Emperor, so he forcibly took Angron in the midst of the final assault on the fortress. Without their leader, the army of gladiators was slaughtered to the last warrior. For this, Angron would harbour resentment and anger towards the Emperor for his entire life. Angron, in general, was very quick-tempered and wrathful, but after an operation performed on him during his time with the gladiators, his rage reached inhuman heights. Deep in his brain was implanted a device called the Butcher's Nails. It constantly irritated certain parts of the brain, causing the user an overwhelming urge to kill and provoking endless fury. Therefore, one could only imagine how angry the Primarch was at his father. Angron did not want to command his legion, which was named the War Dogs. Thus, he did not even attempt to communicate with them. At the first meeting, he brutally killed the Astartes sent to acquaint themselves with him. However, one of the Space Marine captains named Khan managed to speak with the Primarch and, after hearing his story, drew parallels between the life of the gladiators on Nuceria and the actions of the Legion prior to the Primarch's discovery. Another captain said that under Angron's command they would become the World Eaters. Angron liked this name, as it referred to his fallen comrades, and he ordered his legion to henceforth be called by it. Angron also implemented certain reforms in the legion's tactics. He created a new training system, more brutal and harsh, which included gladiatorial combat to first blood. But the most significant change Angron introduced was the decree to implant a butcher's nail in each Astartes' brain. This turned the Legion, which already had a lackluster reputation, into true killing machines. They did not perceive pain and losses, and they charged at the enemy with bloodshot eyes. The worlds to which the 12th Legion was sent could immediately be considered as worlds of the dead. The World Eaters practically annihilated entire civilizations on dozens and hundreds of planets. After reviewing the reports on the operations of the 12th Legion, the Emperor forbade Angron from using the butcher's nails on recruits. Nevertheless, Angron continued to secretly implant them in the brains of the neophytes. Although the World Eaters brought a multitude of glorious victories to the Imperium, they also came to be seen by others as cruel barbarians who could think only of carnage, their entire life being an endless battle. Such unbridled rage and old grievances against the Emperor would ultimately drive Angron to betray the Imperium and surrender to the ruinous forces. His mind was as sharp as a blade, and his belief in order unwavering. Such are the words to describe the next Primarch we shall talk about today. The pod containing Guilliman landed on the planet Macragge. This planet was part of a small stellar empire created by colonists from the dark age of technology. Its industrial capabilities survived the Age of Strife, allowing humanity in this part of the galaxy to preserve the secrets of constructing ships with sublight speed technology and maintaining some ancient warp-capable vessels in working condition. The pod with the Primarch was discovered by the family of Conor Guilliman, one of the two consuls of Macragge. Conor adopted the boy. The young Primarch quickly absorbed everything the sages of Macragge could teach him. Guilliman demonstrated a particular talent for military affairs, a crucial science on this harsh planet. Therefore, upon reaching maturity, Guilliman, at the behest of his adoptive father, led a military campaign into the northern lands inhabited by barbaric tribes. Guilliman conducted a flawless military campaign, covering himself with the glory of a brilliant commander. The lands were conquered by his army, and the northern tribes were filled with respect for the talented Primarch. However, instead of a triumphant hero's welcome, Guilliman's army saw columns of smoke from the capital, known as Macragge Civitas. Upon meeting the refugees, the Primarch learned that the second consul of Macragge, consumed by envy towards the more beloved Conor by the people, had raised a rebellion, seized the capital, and was now assaulting the Senate. Guilliman alone rushed into the heart of the city, demolishing any rebel resistance in his path. Upon reaching the Senate, he found only ruins. The Primarch found his father under the rubble, who, while dying, revealed to him the names of all involved in the rebellion. Among them was the aristocracy, discontented with Conor's leniency towards the common populace and fearing his son's power. Guilliman, with his faithful army, brutally crushed the uprising. The aristocracy was shackled in chains and, under the governance of the people they had formerly belittled, were forced to rebuild the capital. The leaders of the rebellion were hanged on gallows lined along the central street. Amidst deafening cries of support from his people, Guilliman assumed the mantle of Consul of Macragge. The Primarch established a very fair policy where hard work and dedication were supported, and all were equal. Macragge entered a golden age. It was during this time that the Emperor's fleet arrived at the neighbouring planet Espandor. There, the Emperor heard tales of the great hero and ruler of Macragge and decided to meet him personally, realizing in the stories his lost son. However, their fleet was caught in a warp storm, and since time flows differently in the Immaterium by the time they arrived on the planet, Guilliman had already been ruling for 5 years. During this time, the Primarch delved into the study of ancient manuscripts, wherein he read about the existence of a vast and powerful human empire far beyond the Sea of Stars and dreamed of establishing contact with it. Upon arriving at Macragge, the Emperor saw that the planet prospered. It possessed excellent technological development, maintained a large and well-trained army, and traded with several nearby systems. Under considerable impression, the Emperor entrusted Guilliman with command of the 13th Legion, the Ultramarines. Guilliman already suspected that he was not born but deliberately created by someone, and upon recognizing the Emperor as his father, he led his army of Celestial Legionnaires. The 13th Legion was a fitting match for their Primarch, simultaneously fierce yet judicious, disciplined and noble. They welcomed their Primarch with joy, although they were uncertain about what to expect from his command. Nevertheless, the insightful Guilliman shared with his sons grand plans, dispelling any shadow of doubt. The Primarch aimed not only to command his army and lead it to victories in glory of the Imperium of mankind, but also to create the perfect military machine. Under Guilliman's leadership, the Ultramarines conquered numerous worlds at record-breaking speed, second only to the swift commencement of the Lunar Wolves campaign. The Primarch did not leave the worlds he captured until he personally appointed the ruling elite and set the course for the planet's political development. Thus, the Primarch formed a very reliable network of communications between the worlds, ensuring a constant flow of recruits for his legion, which turned the Ultramarines into one of the largest legions throughout the Great Crusade. The star system network created around Macragge was named Ultramar, and became an empire within the empire under Guilliman's leadership. Nevertheless, the impending fratricidal war soon threatened to destroy the Primarch's magnificent project. The next Primarch, whose story you will hear today, harbours a hatred for weakness and an unwavering will to survive. His legion became a tool of death, invincible under the most horrific conditions. The Primarch of the 14th Legion was found on the ominous planet Barbarous. The planet's sky was shrouded with clouds of toxic mist, mountain ranges were regularly washed by acid rains, and a human would instantaneously perish upon inhaling the toxic vapours. In these mountains, only enormous, horrifying monsters could survive. Their true name, unfortunately, has not been preserved, but people called them giants or warlords. They eternally battled among themselves, but not personally, rather through the use of creatures they had created from pieces of human bodies. And indeed, humans managed to survive on this planet, but only in deep lowlands where the mist did not descend. They lived in constant fear that monsters would come down from the mountains and take them for their dreadful experiments. One day, one of the most powerful warlords, basking in victory in a just-concluded battle, suddenly heard the cry of an infant. He was extremely surprised, for the infant could breathe the toxic fog with ease. At first, the giant intended to kill the child, but then realized that the child was likely very strong and it would be unwise to lose such a promising warrior for his internecine battles. The giant took the boy in, built a massive fortress in the mountains, which became both home and prison for the child. Moreover, the giant also constructed a smaller fortress even higher in the mountains, where the fog was too poisonous, even for the young Primarch. This was a precautionary measure, should the boy ever turn against his guardian. The creature taught the Primarch the art of war and how to craft weapons and armor, and gave him the name Mortarion, meaning child of death. Mortarion assisted his adoptive father in battles against other giants and followed his mentor's every instruction. However, as he grew older, he became increasingly interested in the people, those weak beings whom the giant captured to forge new warriors for his army. And one day, the Primarch fled to the lowlands under the Guardian's wrathful cries. Then the giant swore that if Mortarion ever returned, the Master of War would personally kill him. Descending from the mountains, Mortarion inhaled pure air for the first time, and witnessed normal human society and carefree laughter. However, his appearance repelled the people. The Primarch was much taller than any of them, had very pale skin, and a fearsome gaze. Mortarion decided to win the people's trust by undertaking any hard labor. He managed the harvest single-handedly, albeit meager, but he did not earn much affection until one particular incident occurred. From the mountains descended one of the lesser giants to gather his bloody harvest in the village. The peasants were unable to offer any resistance, yet among them emerged a tall and grim figure with a scythe in hand, which would become his favoured weapon. The Primarch battled the giant, who, seeing that he was losing, fled into the poisonous fog, knowing it was lethal to humans. However, retribution caught up with him even there. Mortarion became the first to kill the Master of War and immediately became a hero in the eyes of the human tribe. The Primarch taught the people weapon forging, instructed them in military matters, and instead of a modest village, soon there rose an entire fortress. People from all over the planet flocked to the Primarch for training, and soon Mortarion decided to travel across the villages himself to protect and teach the peasants. Mortarion realized that with proper training, people could defend themselves against the giants, but he wanted to take it further. Gathering a band of the strongest warriors, the Primarch began training them to withstand the poisonous fog, simultaneously inventing breathing filters. Ultimately, Mortarion led an army against the Masters of War. Slowly but surely the giants fell dead, one by one, until only the last remained, the one who raised the Primarch. At that very moment, people informed Mortarion about a mysterious man trying to find him. This man was the Emperor of Mankind. He offered his assistance in the battle against the last warlord, but the Primarch did not wish to share the glory of victory, especially after so many years of fighting. Then the Emperor set conditions. Mortarion would face the giant in battle alone, and if he lost, he would kneel before the Emperor and swear fealty. The Primarch agreed and began the ascent to the highest mountain peak. However, having climbed high enough, Mortarion realized that he could no longer breathe in such a poisonous fog. His weapons, armor, and breathing filter began to dissolve in the toxic environment. The stubborn Primarch continued his ascent, but fell unconscious right in front of the giant's abode. The last thing he saw was a figure in golden armor who, with one strike, killed his adoptive father. Upon awakening, Mortarion reluctantly knelt before the Emperor and assumed command of the 14th Legion, which he renamed the Death Guard in honor of his barbarous tribe's army. The toxic planet traditionally became the home for his legion. Mortarion taught his legionaries that humanity must be free from oppression by anyone, and that meant the complete annihilation of the Imperium's enemies. The Astartes of the 14th Legion were known for their stubbornness and relentlessness on the battlefield. They slowly pressed against the enemy, breaking their will to flee. Also, this legion, more often than others, used biological, radioactive and chemical weapons, which were very effective. But the worlds captured by the Death Guard more resembled scorched, poisonous deserts. Mortarion was grim and silent, yet managed to build a friendship with Horus. As other brother Primarchs later remarked, Mortarion's loyalty to Horus was greater than to the Emperor himself. However, the Emperor himself said that loyalty to Horus meant loyalty to him. Alas, this was a mistake. A flourishing empire of a brilliant tactician and disciplined warriors without fear or reproach, or the relentless death forces led by the Grim Reaper. These two brothers would meet again on the battlefield thousands of years after the Crusade. All the Primarchs we have spoken of today were the pinnacle of the Emperor's genius. Perfectly calibrated bodies created with the peaks of genetic engineering, and their spirit was forged with the Emperor's willpower and the mystical forces of the Immaterium. These demigods astonished ordinary people with their skills and abilities. However, the Primarch you will learn about next was more unusual than the others. He was the only one among the Primarchs who possessed the ability to freely wield warp energy, and was considered one of the most powerful psykers in the galaxy. It is said that he could already communicate with his father even before the Primarch's discovery by the Emperor, and he landed on a planet far from Terra, named Prospero. On this planet, psykers from all corners of the Imperium, driven by common folk, sought refuge. Prospero was a bastion of knowledge and science, where the mysteries of psychic energy usage were also studied in detail. The capsule that fell in the central square containing an infant emitting incredible energy greatly intrigued the local inhabitants. Magnus quickly mastered the knowledge offered to him by the psykers of Prospero, eventually surpassing them. As he continued to study the art of manipulating the warp, Magnus gradually became the most powerful being on the planet. He was called the Crimson King, not without reason. Magnus appeared unusual even for a Primarch. He was incredibly tall, with reddish skin and bright red hair, and had only one eye. But with this eye, he could gaze into the currents of the warp, which helped him further uncover its secrets. It is said that with just a glance at a person, Magnus could not only read their thoughts, but fully comprehend their entire essence. Thanks to his power, Magnus's presence was clearly reflected in the warp, and he was quickly found by the Emperor. Their meeting unfolded as if they had long been acquainted, which was likely the case, though on a level far beyond ordinary human comprehension. Magnus took command of the 15th Legion, known as the 1,000 Suns, and Prospero became their home. It was one of the latest legions created under extremely unusual circumstances. Warp storms, unseen since the time of the Long Night, erupted over Terra. Whether by chance or by the Emperor's design, a legion was born with immense psychic potential dormant within the Astartes. Initially, they differed little from other legions, but later the dormant abilities awoke, and the at that time small legion could perform on par with their brethren from other legions. However, everything changed with one incident. The 15th Legion was tasked with capturing a planet in the name of the Emperor, destroying the cult that ruled it. But it turned out that every 10th child on the planet possessed psychic abilities, so the Space Marine forces were faced with an entire planet of sorcerers. Never before had the 15th Legion faced such a challenge. In the decisive moment of battle, a black rain poured over the battlefield, and a wail of agony pierced the ears of every combatant. In that moment, one of the Astartes fell, but then something strange occurred. From his armor poured liquid flesh, blood solidified into strange forms, and bones fused with the metallic plates of the armor. All the while the fallen Space Marine mentally screamed, pleading for mercy. This cry echoed in the minds of each of his battle brothers. The legionaries of the 1,000 Suns immediately dispatched the horrific creature, vowing that no one outside the Legion would learn of what transpired. But soon, an epidemic began in the Legion. Gradually, more and more Marines transformed into such monsters. This affliction was named the Flesh Change, and it became almost a sentence for the unique Legion. Everything changed with the arrival of Magnus. On the day of his arrival on Prospero, a small part of the Legion, not yet succumbing to the disease, kneeled before Magnus. But at that moment, an unbreakable psychic bond was forged between the Primarch and his genetic sons. They understood each other without words. Every speech, thought and movement seemed interconnected with everyone around. Magnus had acquired the students and followers he so desired. He exerted every effort to find a cure for the flesh change and discovered it, yet the cost was high. A significant portion of the Legion perished, and ironically they now numbered merely 1,000. Nevertheless, they were taught and led into battle by their Primarch. Thus, the 1,000 Suns endured this trial steadfastly and continued to conquer the galaxy. Yet, the Legion's less-than-stellar reputation among the rest of the Imperium would indeed lead to its downfall. Or perhaps such misfortune was the work of the gods of chaos. The answer to this question shall forever remain a mystery of the universe. Those who possess knowledge foresee coming tragedies. But what shall happen when the Emperor's favoured son rises against him? The story of the next Primarch, who became the epicenter of war in the Imperium, will forever alter the history of humanity. Having ventured beyond the borders of the solar system, the fleet of the Imperium began a gradual expansion into neighbouring star systems, and in one of the nearest, a dying planet named Chthoniya was discovered, where a capsule with the Primarch collided with its surface. This planet became the first home for Horus, but here a small digression is necessary. The fact is, subsequent events of the Crusade ensured the thorough removal of most information regarding Horus. So, unfortunately, we know nothing of his upbringing on Chthoniya or his encounter with the Emperor. Most likely he was raised by one of the gangs where he must have achieved great success, as his Primarch brothers did on their planets. There are numerous legends about the meeting of Horus and the Emperor, but it is difficult to ascertain which one holds the truth. There are versions stating that Horus returned to Terra himself at the head of a small fleet, or that he was found by the Emperor even earlier and then sent to Chthoniya to gain experience among the gangs. However, they all lead to the same conclusion. Horus immediately recognized his father and sovereign and joined the Imperium's crusade without hesitation. Horus took command of the 16th Legion of the Adeptus Astartes, which at that time consisted of merely 10,000 warriors. They were the primary strike force in quelling the lunar cults, for which they earned the name Lunar Wolves. Just as Horus himself knelt before the Emperor, so too did the 16th Legion, genomically crafted from Horus, accept their Primarch as second only to the Emperor of mankind. Additionally, the Legion received reinforcements in the form of recruits from that same Chthonier. However, even here things were not quite so simple, for recruitment was not always voluntary. There were special units that captured entire groups of barbarians and later transported them to the genetic laboratories of Luna, where they were subjected to trials and experiments. The best among them underwent transformation into Space Marines and joined the ranks of the Lunar Wolves, who at that time were composed solely of natives from Terra. The remaining forces were incorporated into the regular army of the Imperium, also known as the Exertus Imperialis, and were assigned to units that became known as the Chthonier Headhunters. The Lunar Wolves earned a reputation as fierce and loyal warriors, rarely showing emotion. They possessed incredible endurance and patience, and yet there was an undercurrent of aggression in their every action and word. Even before the discovery of Horus, the Legion had distinguished itself admirably. A very characteristic event for the Legion was the unification of Somon. This was a small cluster of suborbital principalities that did not wish to accept the laws of the Imperium and become part of it. The most significant resistance came from Somon Prime, a large orbital station. The ruler of this system was hosting yet another diplomatic delegation from the Imperium, which included Captain Lurken Hearn of the Third Company of the Lunar Wolves. It was upon him that the wrath of the ruler, who was quite tired of the Imperium's insistence on annexing their territories, fell. The captain of the Third Company had to surrender his weapons and accompany the ruler, enduring a whole tirade on the monstrosity of the Imperium and creations like the Astartes, receiving a plethora of insults. Seeing that the Space Marine remained calm, the ruler, out of anger, spat at him and struck him with a staff, yet it provoked no reaction at all. It was only when the station's ruler was exhausted and almost collapsing that Lurken Hearn responded. In mere seconds he killed all the guards in the room with his bare hands and then tore off the ruler's head. The rulers of the other stations, upon learning that a single Astartes could achieve such a feat with his bare hands, instantly agreed to join the Imperium. But let us return to Horus. Since he was found much earlier than the other Primarchs, he spent a considerable amount of time with the Emperor, and a very strong bond developed between them. On the battlefield, they often fought shoulder to shoulder, saving each other's lives and covering each other's flanks. Horus became a reliable companion of the Emperor and a magnificent commander of the Crusades' army. As we have mentioned earlier, the Primarchs were created from the genetic material of the Emperor himself, and thus inherited a part of his magnificence and genius. Primarchs grew much faster than ordinary humans, requiring only a few years to reach the development of an adult human. They eagerly absorbed any knowledge, quickly learning any skills, but ultimately excelled at nearly everything. Each possessed supernatural charisma, genius, strategic acumen, and unparalleled combat skills. But Horus stood out even among his lost brothers. A cult of personality quickly formed around him, solely dedicated to the worship of the Emperor. He was both feared and respected, and even his brother Primarchs would in the future acknowledge him as their chief. With the arrival of Horus, as well as the new Space Marines from Chthonier, the 16th Legion underwent some changes. New customs emerged. Many began to wear top-knots and mohawks, emulating the cutthroats from the dying planet. The battle doctrine of the Legion was also in keeping with its Primarch and new homeworld. The main tactic was a swift, ruthless strike on the planet with all forces, a fleet bombardment concurrent with the deployment of a landing party and the ensuing carnage. Dozens, if not hundreds, of planets throughout the history of the Crusade would succumb to the power of the Imperium after just one assault by the Lunar Wolves. The next Primarch is often called the Emperor's Apostle, and by some a prophet of chaos, driven by fanatical faith. His words ignited hearts, but his path led to the downfall of entire worlds. Lorgar Aurelian, the Primarch of the 17th Legion, fell upon the world of Colchis. Once a technologically advanced world, after the Age of Strife, it had degenerated into a feudal society. Lorgar was found by the servants of the planet's main religion, the Covenant. In the eyes of the servants of the Covenant, the boy clearly had divine origins, for he arrived in the light of a bright comet, and the child's skin was of a golden hue. They took him with them, raised and educated him. His mentor and successor was Corpharon, one of the church's prelates. The servants were astounded by the Primarch's eloquence and charisma. Lorgar swiftly grasped the essence of the faith, and thanks to his penetrating sermons and divine appearance, quickly gained followers. He was so successful in his preaching that he rapidly achieved the highest positions. This earned him hatred and envy from the other members of their order. Lorgar constantly dreamed of a beautiful and mighty warrior in golden armor, and beside him stood a one-eyed giant who warned Lorgar of their impending meeting. The Primarch shared his dreams with other members of the Covenant, telling them he had seen a god. He began preaching about the imminent arrival of a deity to the common folk, violating some of their religious rules. It was then that the Primarch's haters began to act. A civil war erupted among the planet's entire population, and an attempt was made on Lorgar's life. However, the assassins were literally torn apart by the Primarch's devoted crowd. Ultimately, victory went to Lorgar. Together with his allies, he stormed the main temple where he had once grown up and killed the main rebels. Less than a year later, the Emperor landed on the planet accompanied by Magnus and his 1,000 sons. Lorgar, upon seeing them, immediately knew they were his father and brother from his visions. He fell to his knees before the Emperor, weeping from joy and the long-awaited reunion, and alongside him all the inhabitants of Colchis also knelt. All the faith's dogmas were rewritten to worship the Emperor, and for several months while the Emperor lingered on the planet, prayers and hymns in his honor echoed unceasingly, much to the Emperor's displeasure. He rejected any divinity, for the fight against worship of any gods was one of the purposes of the Great Crusade. Lorgar led the 17th Legion. They were the principal iconoclasts and advocates of the imperial truths during the Great Crusade, but with the arrival of their Primarch, everything changed. Colchis became the Legion's homeworld. Corpharon was partially transformed into an Astartes and became Lorgar's right hand, and many of his followers wished to undergo the transformation into Astartes. Thus, a flood of recruits blindly devoted to Lorgar and exalting the Emperor as a god surged into the Legion. This led to some conflicts and misunderstandings within the Legion, but eventually the Marines recruited from Terra either succumbed to the eloquent sermons of Lorgar and his inner circle or perished in battles during the Crusade. Lorgar then renamed the Legion to the Word-Bearers, preaching on every world the faith of the God Emperor who will always protect and save. He even wrote a book, Lorgar's Lament, where he proclaimed the Emperor a god in the flesh. Nonetheless, his father was enraged that Lorgar continued to consider him something greater than a man, resulting in a lengthy conversation that broke the son's heart. The Master of Mankind explained to Lorgar that he was not a god, and that as a Primarch he was first and foremost a warrior, not a preacher, and that his primary duty was to conquer worlds, not the hearts of their inhabitants. Lorgar's faith was shattered by this conversation. He understood that everything he had believed in since childhood and preached to people was a lie. With a heavy heart, he promised the Emperor he would continue the crusade and immediately departed. However, that was not all. As punishment for teaching people false beliefs, the Emperor ordered the Ultramarines Legion to destroy the city temple monarchy on the planet Kur. The monarchy was a great gift to the Emperor from his loving son. Lorgar's disappointment and pain knew no bounds. It was then that his followers whispered to him that there were other gods in the galaxy, more lenient towards worship and even encouraging it. If the galaxy was set ablaze in the flames of heresy, then surely there must have been a first heretic. The story of the next Primarch is full of incredible events, his legion the embodiment of mercy, an incredibly rare trait in a world of unending war. The capsule containing the 18th Primarch landed on a world called Nocturne. The planet was covered with an enormous number of volcanoes. Rivers of lava amidst fields were as common a sight as rivers of water on ancient Terra. Once every 15 Terran years, Nocturne's moon, Prometheus, would pass too closely to the planet, increasing seismic activity. The locals refer to these periods as a time of trials, but they were not the only dangers of this world. The diversity of local predators and constant raids by the Dark Eldar disrupted the peace of the inhabitants. Among the population, a religion called the Cult of Prometheus had formed, with one of its tenets being the expectation of some kind of saviour, and in the boy who had fallen upon one of the settlements, they saw the hero of prophecy. Vulcan, as the Primarch was later named, landed at the home of a blacksmith named Unbel, who became his guardian. Over the course of 3 years, Vulcan grew to become the strongest and tallest among his tribe. The Primarch possessed a sharp mind and avidly absorbed the knowledge and culture of Nocturne. However, Vulcan especially loved the art of smithing, frequently assisting his adoptive father in his craft. Even during his childhood, the appearance of the Primarch transformed, resembling more closely the local inhabitants. Due to high radiation, the descendants of the first settlers had eyes that turned red and began to emit a slight glow. Simultaneously, their skin became black, like onyx. These traits were also inherited by Vulcan, who, like any Primarch, could adapt to the environment of his native planets. In due time, the Primarch was presented with an opportunity to showcase his combat prowess. On Nocturne, the Dark Eldar arrived once again, intent on capturing as many slaves as possible. On that day, Vulcan stepped forth to meet them, armed with 2 Forge Master hammers, and led his tribesmen. Legends proclaimed that he felled no less than 100 Eldar before they fled. The Primarch demonstrated to the people that they could resist the raids. All the chieftains of Nocturne's settlements returned to Vulcan and swore an oath that they would no longer hide from danger and would fight to the last. To celebrate the victory over the Eldar, it was decided to hold a traditional contest of strength and intellect. However, at that very moment, a strange, tall man with pale skin and unusual clothing appeared in Vulcan's hometown. He volunteered to participate in the tournament and, more importantly, challenged Vulcan himself, stating that the loser would pledge allegiance to the victor. Vulcan accepted the challenge and the trials commenced. The Primarch and the stranger were equal in power, achieving feats unimaginable to ordinary humans. Thus, the city leaders devised final trials worthy of heroes. Each was to forge their own weapon within a day, and then track and slay one of Nocturne's most fearsome predators, the Fire Salamander. Whoever managed to bring the largest carcass to the city first would be declared the victor. Vulcan forged a hammer, while the mysterious stranger crafted a sword, and both set off towards the largest volcano on the planet, home to the largest and most dangerous salamanders. The Primarch quickly tracked the predator and, killing it with a single blow, made his way toward the city. However, along the way, the ground beneath him collapsed, leaving the Primarch suspended over a lava lake, barely holding onto a ledge. In this precarious position, Vulcan spent many hours, clutching the edge with one hand and still gripping the salamander with the other. Yet even his divine strength was nearing its limits. At that moment, Vulcan saw his opponent carrying an even larger predator. Observing the Primarch in peril, the stranger, without hesitation, flung his catch into the lava, using its fireproof body as a bridge to save Vulcan. Upon returning to the city, the stranger was declared the loser as he returned without his quarry. But suddenly, Vulcan fell to his knees before him and swore loyalty. He said that he would follow without hesitation the one who places the life of another above his own. And at that moment, the stranger revealed himself, being the Emperor of mankind. He invited his newly found son to command the 18th Legion, and Vulcan immediately agreed, setting only one condition: the inhabitants of Nocturne must remain under protection. The Emperor respected his son's request, also declaring Nocturne the homeworld for the Astartes Legion, and offered Vulcan the opportunity to select candidates for new recruits from the local population. However, the Primarch did not immediately join his legion. He wished first to master the military arts and technologies of the Imperium. For some time, the son studied under the Emperor and fought alongside him. Furthermore, Vulcan underwent training in the forges of Mars, where he met his brother Ferrus Manus, with whom a friendship blossomed, as they were both skilled smiths. Vulcan was compelled to reunite with his legion by the urgent need to aid his sons. The 18th Legion was one of 3 Astartes legions, along with the 6th and 20th, developed under the most secretive conditions and separately from the others. The reason for such secrecy specifically with the 18th remains unknown to anyone, except the Emperor and his close confidants. Even during the times of the Unification Wars, the Legion showed itself as extremely resilient and enduring in combat. The warriors performed the impossible on the battlefield, while enduring colossal damage. In the very first battle, out of 20,000 Astartes, only 1,000 remained. Of course, losses were quickly replenished, but the Legion had to be deployed in parts for the conquest of space to different ends of the galaxy. Suicidal attacks, constant operations in the vanguard, and the dispersal of the Legion's combat units contributed to their perpetually low numbers. Skeptics among the Emperor's entourage asserted that, at such a rate, the Legion might become completely extinct. However, through their actions, the Legion earned great fame and honors directly from the Emperor. And it was precisely during one of these most arduous wars that the Primarch had to join the Legion. He named the Legion the Salamanders in honor of the most dangerous predators of his world. The renewed Legion prioritized the protection of the Imperium's inhabitants from the enemies of mankind. The Salamanders also greatly valued their connection with their kin and were the only Legion whose warriors continued to communicate with their relatives from Nocturne. The Space Marines often spent time among the population of their home world, serving as local elders and mentors. The Legion, which is a living example of resilience and humanity for others, will unfortunately endure extremely severe trials. But who, if not the 18th, could overcome them? The next Primarch you will learn about today will become a symbol of the fight against oppression, and his Legion, a nightmare for the enemies of the Imperium. The Primarch was found on a small planet called Lycaeus. This is the moon of the world Kiavar, a world of significant technological advancement, yet under the control of grim tech guilds. All criminals and individuals who fell out of favor with the regime were sent to extract valuable resources on Lycaeus. The Primarch's pod was found by a family of prisoners who sheltered and secretly raised the boy. They named him Corax, which in their language meant liberator. Throughout Corax's childhood, he learned arts of stealth, subversion, sabotage, assassination, and explosives from the prisoners. The Primarch's brilliant mind absorbed new knowledge rapidly. Corax was also notable for his appearance, with his skin unusually pale and his hair and eyes a deep blue-black. Upon maturing and honing his skills in covert warfare, Corax organized the criminals and gradually, through accumulated knowledge and psychological warfare, liberated the entire planet from its guards. The Primarch was aided in this by his innate ability. Corax was impossible to notice until he willed it so. This incredible ability allowed him to remain unseen even while standing directly before his adversary. Once Lycaeus was freed, Corax was visited personally by the Emperor. Father and son talked for many hours, though the conversation's topic is known to few. Afterwards, the Emperor departed, telling the Primarch that his son would need to complete a mission before assuming command of the Legion. At the same time, an army from Kiavar moved towards the moon. Corax meticulously planned the defense, yet he understood that merely repelling the forces from Kiavar would not suffice. He ordered the preparation of atomic charges used in resource extraction, and utilizing the gravitational well between the two planets, initiated a bombardment of the industrial zones of Kiavar. In the atomic fire, thousands perished, and the heavily battered army turned back. The damage to the tech guilds was enormous. Resources from the moon ceased to flow, the army was shattered. The loss of technology and people was immeasurable. The guilds began fighting each other for the remaining resources, and the planet was engulfed in a war of anarchy. Then Corax understood this was the Emperor's lesson: to kill thousands to save millions. The jubilant prisoners renamed Lycaeus to Deliverance in honor of their leader and hero, and held a massive celebration that lasted several days. Then Corax left Deliverance to finally join his legion, named the Raven Guard. Since its inception, The 19th Legion had distinguished itself by excelling in covert operations and sabotage. The Raven Guard became the necessary invisible hand of the Emperor. Their approach to warfare was also valued by Horus, who often called upon the warriors of the 19th for joint operations with the Lunar Wolves. Another significant trait of the Legion was the appearance of the Astartes. Their skin was pale, and their hair and eyes darker than the night. Only upon meeting the Primarch did it become clear where this characteristic originated. Corax, who also received the name Corvus, meaning raven, appreciated the warfare vision of his sons, altering their doctrines only slightly. Corax quickly bonded with his legion, seeing in the Space Marines, who had always fought under the yoke of alien command, something akin to the prisoners of his home world. Under the leadership of their Primarch, the Legion reached incredible heights in devising battlefield tactics. It is said that Corax and Guilliman, considered the greatest tactician and strategist, clashed minds several times in a special tactical simulator. Corax, through unconventional use of rare forces types and specific strategy, managed to defeat his brother 3 times in a row before Guilliman learned his lesson and never lost to his brother again. The Raven Guard swiftly achieved victories, employing all the cunning tricks taught by their Primarch, thereby earning the respect of the other legions. However, the impending series of catastrophic failures would cost the Emperor's secret warriors dearly. The story of the next Primarch, or more precisely, Primarchs, will consist of theories and conjectures, as it involves some of the Imperium's greatest secrets, now known only to the Emperor and the legions themselves. Do not mind the contradictions, for that is as it should be. The history of Alpharius remains unknown at present. Rather, some facts are known which indeed contradict each other. There exist 3 different versions of the Primarch's discovery, although likely all 3 are false. The first version is one of the most popular. Unlike other Primarchs, Alpharius was found not by the Master of Mankind, but by Horus. One day, an unknown space fleet of primitive lightships raided one of the Lunar Wolves' vessels, which, however, thanks to tactics unknown to the Imperium, managed to destroy a Space Marine heavy cruiser. This could not escape Horus's attention, who personally directed his ships to that sector. However, the Primarch did not expect carefully prepared ambushes and swift attacks. Of course, the primitive starships could not withstand the onslaught of Imperial weaponry, but the tactics of the unknown fleet effectively slowed the advance of the Lunar Wolves. In one such ambush, a ship from the unknown fleet discreetly approached Horus's flagship. The pilot landed on the cruiser, methodically eliminating the crew aboard, and advanced toward the bridge. The attacker dealt with Horus's bodyguards and engaged in combat with him personally. Yet there was a reason why Horus had earned a reputation as a skillful warrior. Soon he triumphed in the duel. As he was about to raise his power maul over the attacker's head, Horus suddenly sensed that before him stood the last of his lost brothers. The Primarch of the Lunar Wolves quickly brought his newly found brother up to speed, admiring his cunning tactics and brilliant ambushes. During their conversation, Horus attempted to uncover what fate had befallen his brother after landing and emerging from the capsule, what had occurred while he was still a child. However, the answer was stubborn silence. After this meeting, Alpharius, as the found Primarch called himself, spent several months with Horus, learning from him and even establishing something akin to friendship. Then he travelled to Terra to meet his father. The Emperor, however, spent only a short time with his son, as he was engaged in one of his major secret projects, so Alpharius quickly assumed command of his legion, joining the crusade. The second theory was extracted from the mind of one of the legionnaires after the heresy, but its authenticity is even more widely questioned. According to this version, Alpharius fell on a nameless dead world. It contained the ruins of an ancient civilization, long destroyed even before the dawn of human life on Terra. The Primarch spent his entire childhood in solitude, surviving amidst the fierce elements and ghosts of this planet's past. One day, a spaceship descended from the sky with a crew of pirates consisting of mutants, humans, and Xenos. They intended to find something valuable among the ruins, but found only their death at the hands of Alfarius. He took their equipment and occupied their ship, beginning his journey among the stars, all to find his creator. The third version was encrypted in a forbidden heretical tome known as the Codex Hydra. According to its pages, Alfarius landed on a technologically advanced world, but a decade later the planet was attacked by Xenos. These were worm-like creatures attacking inhabited planets, devouring entire populations. Alfarius was the only one capable of resisting them, and thus only he was spared by the Xenos and taken aboard their spacecraft. There they brutally tortured the Primarch, distorting his mind. They wanted to enslave him and turn him into a living weapon, to sow discord on worlds, heralding the imminent arrival of their terrible masters to a feast. However, at that moment the Xenos ship was boarded by the Emperor's cruiser, who personally fought his way to his captive son. Ablaze with righteous wrath, the Emperor left no Xenos alive. After bringing his son aboard his ship, the Emperor attempted to restore his mind with his psychic power. Over several years, Alfarius travelled with his father, gradually regaining his sanity. Ultimately, Alfarius became the Emperor's secret agent, executing his covert orders, and later led his legion in the Crusade. In the same tome, it is said that Alfarius was the only Primarch whom the Emperor considered incomplete to the end, and thus he particularly regretted the harsh trials that befell his son. By the time of the 40th millennium, it cannot be said for certain which of this is true and which is not. It is possible that some elements from all the stories echo the truth, but what can be said almost for certain is that one of the main secrets and the key feature of the Primarch of the 20th Legion is that, in fact, there were two of them. Alfarius has a twin brother named Omegon. Both Primarchs shared one soul between the two of them, yet physically they were somewhat less developed than their brothers from other legions. For example, the Primarchs of the Alpha Legion were only slightly taller than regular Space Marines. This, incidentally, was not a disadvantage for them, given the nature of their legion, which thrived on secrets, deception, and covert operations. For instance, during battle, the Primarchs liked to don the standard armor of their legionaries so that the enemy could not locate the commander on the battlefield. This also allowed the twins to seemingly be in two places at once. After all, no one, except for the Alpha Legion itself, not even the Emperor, knew of Omegon's existence. For the most part, Omegon was occupied with covert operations and internal management within the Legion, while Alfarius was the official face of the Legion. Concerning the Primarchs themselves, there is no further significant information. At least, no one knows about it anymore. However, there are still some facts about the Legion itself. The only thing that can be said is that Alfarius's reunification with the 20th Legion was the smoothest and most peaceful compared to the other Primarchs. This was one of the Legion's greatest prides. The Legion was united as if a single organism. Even during the creation of the legions on Terra, the Emperor developed the 20th Legion in utmost secrecy, alongside the Space Wolves and Salamanders. The reason for such mystery remains unknown. Perhaps the Emperor conducted certain experiments, as it is mentioned that the gene seed of the Alpha Legion took root exceptionally well in the bodies of recruits. It is known for certain that the 20th Legion was developed last of all, so it commenced its actions later than the others. There are conflicting reports that the Legion was created just a decade before the Primarch was found, but it is more likely that a small part of it was created earlier. The small numbers and late creation, in truth, did not diminish their effectiveness. Much like their Primarch, the Legion's history is filled with gaps, contradictions, and misunderstandings. For instance, the name of the Legion was a secret for a long time, even to other Astartes and Primarchs. Among those closest to the Emperor, rumors circulated about a small assembly of Space Marines known as Alpha. Whether this was the true name or it merely solidified over time, the Legion later became known precisely as the Alpha Legion. At the beginning of the Great Crusade, the 20th Legion was one of the smallest, which was one of the reasons why major open battles of the Alpha were not recorded. but the main reason was the specific direction of their activities. This legion was used by the Emperor to enforce order on Terra itself, and then in the rear of the Crusade, restoring order on rebellious planets through the abduction or covert assassination of rebellion leaders, as well as through cunning secret sabotage. After the end of the Age of Strife and the beginning of the Great Crusade, the Alpha Legion disappears from the radar of Imperial history for several decades. However, some historians of the Imperium associate such mysterious events and strange coincidences precisely with the activities of the Alpha. According to some testimonies from those times, sometimes during operations of other legions, new units of these legions would suddenly appear in identical armor but acted completely independently, not responding to command requests, and would then silently vanish. It is possible that witnesses observed a rare and well-known example of the work of the 20th Legion. The clearest example of the reasons for creating such an Emperor's secret police was the tragedy with the gene seed of the 3rd Legion, when unknown assailants infected the samples with a virus, virtually annihilating the Emperor's children. Shortly after this incident, more substantial reports of Alpha activities began to appear. Their favored tactic was the development of complex and cunning strategies, usually carried out far from the location of their operations. The establishment of a network of spies and agents, prolonged reconnaissance and observation, followed by a targeted attack, the assassination of enemy leaders, sabotage, and then a swift disappearance from the scene of action. When dealing with the Alpha Legion, do not think that you see all of them. If you see 10, it means you do not see 100. If you see 100, consider that there are 1,000 of them. And if you see only one, then there are all 10,000 of them. This was said about the Alpha Legion among the Imperial Command. To further complicate the opponent's determination of who exactly attacked them, the Alpha Legionaries carried no symbols of their legion or used unknown heraldry. After the Primarchs were discovered, the Legion adopted the practice of plastic surgery. Astartes acquired the faces of Alfarius, but the Space Marines did not just resemble their Primarch, they became him. Each legionnaire spoke of themselves as Alfarius, the Primarch of the 20th Legion. This only added more confusion both to the enemy ranks and allied forces. No one would be able to find Alfarius if you are all Alfarius. Additionally, the Alpha Legion often used long-forgotten languages and dialects in negotiations with each other, which further added to their aura of mystery. Almost nothing is known about any of the operations of the Ghost Legion, as they became known in the Imperium. No one knew how many of them there were and what they were capable of, which undoubtedly played into the Legion's hands. It is also not precisely known when exactly the Alpha Legion, led by their discovered Primarch, began to operate openly. It seems Alfarius favored the tactics of his legion, as their actions on the battlefields did not change. As an emblem, the legionaries carried the letter Alpha, which in fact alludes to their name. But Alfarius also introduced a second emblem. This was an image of the Hydra, a creature from the ancient myths of Terra. The Hydra resembles a serpent with 3 heads, which is extremely difficult to slay, for with each severed head, 2 new ones grow in its place. Such a creature was simply a perfect fit for the philosophy of the entire Legion. No one ever knew exactly where the head of the Legion was, and the serpentine cunning and treachery of Alfarius were evident to the naked eye. One of the most significant events in the life of the Alpha Legion was the meeting of the Primarchs with representatives of the Cabal, an organization of alien races, also including the Eldar and humans. They warned the twins that in 2 years the greatest heresy would erupt, and it had 2 outcomes. The heresy itself was inevitable, and either chaos would prevail in the most important battle, but afterward would be annihilated, or the Imperium would win, but in that case it would spell its doom in the long run. After learning both potential futures, the brothers sided with the traitors, but it remains unclear whether it was to aid them or to oppose them from within. The Imperium will likely never know. If the story of the Alpha Legion seemed convoluted and lacking in details, the long-promised tale of the lost Primarchs will astonish you. Here the situation is even more difficult. all data was destroyed, and the Primarchs themselves were anathematized. But some clues have nonetheless been preserved. However, they are likewise contradictory and cannot provide a complete picture of what transpired. We know for certain that the Emperor intended there to be exactly 20 legions, and there were 20 capsules with Primarchs. It is also mentioned that the Emperor found all his sons, one by one, who achieved great success on the worlds that sheltered them, and Alfarius was the last Primarch found. Thus, the 2nd and 11th were also found. All 20 legions participated in the Great Crusade under the leadership of their Primarchs, each of whose souls the ruinous powers of chaos tried to seduce, but exactly half succumbed to them. This suggests that one of the erased Primarchs defected to the side of chaos, but it is unknown which. However, during the heresy, Horus mentions only the legions known to us and describes only 18 of them. Perhaps by the time of the betrayal, the lost legions were already erased from history, and the book Index Imperialis states that one of the Primarchs possessed the ability of complete invisibility. Possibly, it refers to the stealth talents of Corvus Corax, but still, speaking of invisibility, this does not quite suit Corax, meaning invisibility might have been possessed by the lost Primarch. It is also known that Rogel Dawn mentioned that in the Imperial Palace, in one of the halls, there is a statue of all the Primarchs. The statues of the traitorous heretics were covered with cloth but not removed, yet the pedestals of the 2nd and 11th had been vacant for many years, even before the heresy. What crime did these Primarchs commit that even the Great Heresy was not a dreadful enough event to erase the traitors from history? This too we are unlikely to ever learn. Once Horus received a vision from the ruinous powers. He was in the Emperor's laboratory, and right before him stood the capsules containing him and his brothers. As he passed by the 11th capsule, Horus mentioned that he felt incredible power emanating from that infant. Nevertheless, it must be remembered that the vision was invoked by chaos, and thus it should not be fully trusted. Additionally, in one of the conversations between Lorgar and Magnus, he remarked that he feared the Emperor's wrath and dreaded taking a place beside the crossed-out Primarchs, about whom they do not speak. To this, Magnus reminded him that they had sworn never to discuss this topic again, as Magnus himself risked becoming one of the forgotten Primarchs. For the events during the Horus heresy, Magnus was judged, and the Emperor's disappointment in his son was immense. This means the wolves will be unleashed once more. Pay attention to the word once more. In other words, the quote implies that the Space Wolves Legion, having assumed the role of the Emperor's executioners, had already carried out similar orders, suggesting that this very Space Wolves Legion was responsible for the censure of the 2nd and 11th Legions. Further supporting this theory are the strange gaps in the chronology of the Space Wolves Legion. The events occurring in the 965th and 969th years of the 30th millennium, events in which the Space Wolves participated, are marked as all data deleted. It is possible that during these years 2 entire legions were condemned, and the Wolves were direct participants in the events. Another intriguing fact is that shortly after the 2nd and 11th legions were consigned to oblivion, the Ultramarines unexpectedly gained a large number of new recruits, becoming the largest legion. The coincidence is particularly amusing, as 2 plus 11 equals 13, and the Ultramarines are indeed the 13th Legion. If you enjoyed this journey, do not forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell to avoid missing new stories about the grim future of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. Share in the comments which of the Primarchs you feel closest in spirit to and whose path seems most captivating to you.